Welcome to episode 3 of Epitaph, East Anglia. This episode will be a little bit different. Instead of visiting a grave in our normal format and talking about the circumstances behind it, I wanted to do a special release episode for Remembrance Sunday. So the episode's been delayed by a few days, and I had so many recording problems yesterday. It's actually coming out a day after Remembrance Sunday, but before the 11th. As most of you will know if you followed me for a while, one of my main side quests for the Norma Explores project is visiting UK war graves and researching the stories behind them. So very much along the lines of the other headstones that we find in the Epitaph podcast. Whereas my normal episodes are very often accidents and true crime, the war graves are slightly different. I don't always have a lot of information about the people that I find. Very often the information that's out there is quite limited. So today I'm going to visit a few of my favourite spots around East Anglia where I found Commonwealth War Grave headstones that I've done a little bit of research on. One of the main things that you'll notice when I start talking about the graves we're going to look at today is that many of the burials on UK soil are of lads lost in training. Many of them didn't actually make it onto the battlefields themselves. Some of them died by their own hands. Some of them died of illness. Some of them died by accident while they were home on leave. So they very often get missed out. I think when anyone visits the huge cemeteries in France and Europe, obviously you are very much more aware of the battlefields themselves. You know that they were serving and fighting at the point that they were lost, whereas most of the burials on home soil, although some of them are people that died having suffered injuries and passed away sort of months after they came back, an awful lot of them don't have great war stories to tell. They didn't die gloriously in battle. They still died serving the country, and that's what I would like to remember here. They still gave up their life in order to serve, in order to do what they can, particularly during the First World War. A lot of the graves you see are very, very young men, and they don't have lots that I can talk about. They very often left a very small village that they'd grown up in. They'd worked in that village perhaps before joining up. They don't have a lot of documented history because they came straight from school, from their first, second jobs, straight into training, joining up, and they hadn't lived a life yet, so it's hard to write a full biography. And that's why I don't tend to do episodes on an awful lot of these, because there's simply not very much I can say about them. I don't know the families, I don't know the stories about their early lives, so it's not something I cover an awful lot, simply because I can't find that much out in order to make a 30-40 minute episode. So today I'm going to talk about several of them just so that I can get the names out there. Hopefully, if you are out and about and you get the opportunity to visit any of these graves, you can stop by and see them in person. and it's difficult because I would love to be able to write sort of full and interesting stories about their lives before conflict, but it's just not always possible. I'm going to start on the Norfolk coast at Munsley. This was one of the first churchyards I ever explored with the view to finding war graves, several years ago now, and I think because of that it's one that sticks with me. I revisit it quite often, and there's a variety of headstones here which really illustrate the sort of both ends of the spectrum when it comes to the types of people serving that you find in virtually any village churchyard across the UK. There's actually a Commonwealth War Graves app that's really good, where you can search your location and the churches surrounding you that have war graves. So that's a really good research resource if you're looking to see which churches and cemeteries near to you have war graves that you can go and visit. So I definitely recommend having a look at that. It's a really useful tool, and that was how I found Munsley when I was actually on my summer holidays a few years ago, before I started the Norma Explores project. And those were the first handful of graves that I researched and sort of led me down the rabbit hole that is now Norma Explores. But Munsley has a beautiful little church. It was actually virtually ruinous at the end of the 19th century. It was saved and restored, and was actually rebuilt at the dawn of the First World War. It's one of those churches that if you're able to visit and you can go inside, if it's open, do go and have a look. They have a wonderful war memorial inside the church, and like many of the churches that we are lucky enough to have here in the UK, if you go inside, you'll find a very dedicated person has put together folders where you can browse the names of all of the war dead on the memorial, and many of them do have short biographies and information on where men were buried if they're not in the churchyard, and it's a really, really great resource. So if you are interested in sort of discovering more about your local churches and who's buried there, always take a look inside, because I found this last year when I was travelling the back roads of the UK, looking in the smallest of country churches. Very many of them do have folders with information in about the local war dead, and those who served, whether they're buried in the church or further afield. So have a look if you're passing your local church. Put your head in and go and see what they've got, because there's all sorts of little surprises that I've discovered on my adventures while I've been moving around the countryside looking for war graves. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission has 12 identified war graves at Munsley. I have found them all and photographed them all. Some of them really aren't obvious. Some of the family headstones do make it very hard to make out if they haven't been maintained. So I did actually have two goes at locating the war graves in Munsley Churchyard, but I have now photographed them all. I won't discuss them all here. I haven't researched them all yet. But one of the things I find interesting about Munsley is that those buried in the churchyard here represent a broad spectrum of war stories and war experiences, from a casualty who received DSO to graves of unknown sailors who were pulled from the sea here, to one of the graves that I'm going to talk about in a minute, who was a teenager lost before he was even deployed. I will offer a trigger warning for the first story that I'm going to cover. I do talk about suicide, and it's one of those topics that comes up quite a lot in my research, but if that is going to be sensitive to you, you might want to skip on by a few minutes. But first, I'm going to introduce you to the story of Private Maurice Nesbitt. Maurice is buried in the northwest corner of the graveyard, and he does have a white Commonwealth War grave headstone, so he is easy to find. And I think this one has stuck with me for a couple of reasons. It was the very first war grave I decided to research when I first got my Ancestry membership and my British newspapers membership, and I sort of had the facility to see what I could find out. And he was mentioned in the press, which I will come to in a minute. But I think it also stuck with me that I had assumed that when I was researching these, I would find lots of heroic tales, lots of stories of wartime heroism, and actually this one sort of brought me down to earth very, very quickly, because it's a very humbling story of a teenager who was basically taken from his home and everything he knew and put in a situation where he was going to be sent off to a foreign country to fight. Maurice was born in 1899 in Leeds, and he was one of 5 sons to Elizabeth and John Nesbitt. His father would actually die when he was just 5 years old, and his mother would go on to see 4 of her sons go off to fight in the First World War. He was called up on the 1st of February 1917 and enlisted at Macclesfield. He would join the 23rd Battalion Royal Welsh Fusiliers. The battalion was based at Munsley, and Maurice was only 2 months into his training when he was found dead in his billet. The following is an extract from the inquest, and again I include a trigger warning here for suicide, so skip on if that's going to be troubling. Reported in the East Anglia press on the 10th of April 1917. A painful discovery was made at Munsley early on Monday when Private Maurice Nesbitt of the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, on being called by some of his comrades, was found dead with a cut throat. A razor was lying nearby. The deceased was about 18 years old and came from Macclesfield. It goes on. He did not enjoy the most robust health and also suffered from deafness in one ear, the result of attack of scarlet fever. He joined the army about 9 weeks ago. About a fortnight ago, he had been seen on the edge of a cliff when he should have been on parade. The jury returned a verdict of suicide during a fit of temporary insanity. Although he had been questioned at the time revealing his intentions, he did confide in one of his comrades later that when he'd been found on the cliff previously, he was considering throwing himself over. I think what struck me with this one is that this must have been a scene recreated all over the country at this point. You had teenage boys taken from their families joining up, some more enthusiastically than others, but it was a complete life change, and I think particularly in Maurice's case, he already had brothers serving. He perhaps knew a little of what he would find when he got deployed. One of the things I dwell on quite a lot with cases like this is not only what happened to the person whose grave I'm researching, but the family that would have been left to deal with the aftermath of this. In this case, several months after Maurice's death, his brother Robert, who was a private with the Lancashire Fusiliers, would be killed in action at Ypres, and he was just 20. And that's something his mother, who'd already lost her husband, was having to deal with largely alone, although perhaps with the support of other families and parents who were in similar situations. She did have 2 of her sons join the Royal Navy, and they would survive the war. And there was a 5th brother who was actually a conscientious objector, and he undertook farm work during the conflict. That in itself was not an easy option. At the time, it wouldn't have been looked on favourably, and it's something that highlights what Maurice felt he needed to do, having joined up and gone off to training, only to find that actually it was more than he could take. In contrast to Maurice, who died while still in training, we also have the grave here of Major Thomas Henry Fielder Johnson, who served with the 6th Battalion Dorsetshire Regiment. Thomas was born on the 17th of November 1879. He arrived on the Western Front on the 13th of June 1915 as an officer in command of D Company, and by March of the following year was acting second in command of the battalion. He was wounded on the 6th of July 1916 and would subsequently be awarded a DSO, a Distinguished Service Order, a gallantry award recognising successful command operations. Thomas relinquished his commission on account of his ill health caused by his wounds and was granted the honorary rank of Major. Sadly, he would die on the 9th of March 1919 at just 39 years old. And I think one of the things which we have to assume is that he died as a result of the injuries that he sustained. Something that crops up quite often is the length of time between someone being injured and when they would die. Often quite a long time later. And I think that's the thing which, if you think about it too much, is one of the most depressing things out there, that he must have been suffering and uncomfortable for a significant amount of that time. I've seen cases, particularly with the First World War, where soldiers were brought back after being gassed. I've seen cases where they had horrific injuries from explosions which would eventually take their lives, but it would be months, and in one case more than a year, between those two events. And I think that's the thing that we need to remember, that it wasn't always just a case of being killed on the battlefield. A lot of the time, the soldiers that were brought back to die on home turf and are the ones that we find in our local cemeteries are the ones that truly suffered. Not only the physical injuries that they would be attempting to recover from, but the psychological impact of what they went through, both at the time they were injured and everything that happened afterwards. In the case of Thomas, he obviously survived for almost 3 years between his injuries and when he finally died. And although I don't know what those wounds were, they obviously were enough to cause him to leave the army. And in many cases would contribute to other illnesses. I've seen on a few occasions where someone would catch the flu or a respiratory issue, which would be impacted and made far worse and sometimes made fatal by the condition that they were already suffering. And I think that's one of the things that makes me sad about sometimes the graves in local cemeteries getting overlooked, shall we say, by an awful lot of people who choose to go and visit cemeteries overseas rather than taking the time to see what's local to them and finding out a little bit about the circumstances that brought men home. Thomas would actually have a brother, Edward, serving as a captain with the Royal Field Artillery, and he would be killed in action on the 5th of December 1917, and he was just 36 years old. And that's something, again, that crops up quite a lot. It's very rarely just one member of a family being lost during this war. It's the rabbit hole you end up down sometimes when you go and look at census reports to see who else was out there. And I've spent quite a lot of time researching extended family as you find more and more about sort of someone and their relatives that were fighting, and then you go off down a different tangent, and it's something that you could probably just keep doing forever. There's so many stories out there where you get to meet whole families without fully being able to tell their stories, but you can glean enough to know what it must have been like for the families that were still at home, and in some cases not knowing for months and years on end what was happening to their loved ones. The last grave that I'm going to comment on from Munsley for the First World War is one that I have very little information on, but you'll see why it's a memorable one. It's not a bright white Commonwealth War Grave Commission headstone, it's a grey family headstone, and it belongs to Private Walter George Earl. He was born in nearby Gimmingham in 1900, and his family actually lived in Munsley at 11 Railway Terrace. He served with the Queen's, the Royal West Surrey Regiment, and I don't know the cause of his death. I don't know why he came to die on home turf. I don't know whether he was serving and was injured and brought home, or whether he was awaiting deployment and died of ill health. I don't have that information. But when you visit his grave, you will see the saddest part of his story. The date of his death is the 11th of November 1918, Armistice Day. I truly can't imagine what it must have been like for his family to lose him just as the war ended and it was going to be over. And he's not the only one that I found who died so close to the end of the war, either just before or just after Armistice Day. And somehow I don't need to know the circumstances to know what a tragic loss this would have been. Munsley does have graves for men lost in the Second World War, and again, I think the ones that stick with me are perhaps the ones that get overlooked the most. So the last grave I want to point out specifically is that marking the last resting place of a sailor of the 1939-1945 war who served with the Merchant Navy and was found on the 29th of February 1940. Somewhere a family grieved for this son, never knowing that he lay buried in a churchyard on the Norfolk coast. They didn't know that they could visit him here, and that's why anytime I see a grave to an unknown serviceman, I like to stop and pay my respects on behalf of the family that never knew where they ended up. So from the Norfolk coast, we're going to go all the way down to the Suffolk-Essex border, to an incident that claimed the lives of 6 men. And one of the reasons that I want to talk about their story is that they were all members of the Home Guard. And I think it's easy for everyone to have a slightly comical take of the Home Guard and their activities, thanks to Dad's Army, which I'm fairly sure we all enjoy. But it does sometimes mean that people forget that there are still members who were doing their bit and did die in service to their country. In this case, we have 3 of the men are buried in Sybil Hedingham, 1 in Castle Hedingham, 1 in Belchamp Walter, and another in Pentlow. And if you've been to my Substack, you may be familiar with this already. I did do an article about Pentlow Church last year. The incident takes place on the 23rd of April 1944, where members of the Home Guard, the 15th Essex Battalion, were attending a training exercise at Rectory Farm in one of the nearby villages. Captain Philp was giving a demonstration on how to deal with unexploded grenades. The captain was the battalion weapons officer and was experienced in handling explosives. During the demonstration, it's thought that some unstable gelignite detonated, perhaps due to the heat of the day, as there was a report of it being sat in direct sunlight at the time. At the inquest, it was stated that the captain had shown all due precaution with regards to the grenades that he was demonstrating, and had impressed upon the men watching that safety precautions needed to be observed. Unfortunately, on this occasion, the accident that followed claimed 6 lives, and 3 other men were injured but did survive. Those lost were Corporal George Chambers, aged 29, who's buried at Pentlow; Corporal John Partridge, aged 36, buried in Belchamp Walter; Captain John Phillip, aged 43, buried in Castle Hedingham; Sergeant John Cousins, aged 33, buried in Sybil Hedingham; Sergeant Thomas Furman, aged 45, buried in Sybil Hedingham; and Corporal Cyril Halls, aged 32, buried in Sybil Hedingham. The 3 men that were buried in Sybil Hedingham are all together. Their graves are next to each other, so if you find them, you can stop and see them all from the same spot. I think the other thing that this highlights is that actually the Home Guard weren't just made up of older men. The age range for the men in this incident is not old by far, the youngest of them at 29 and the oldest of them at 45. And this I've found in other cases with some other Home Guard graves that I've found, where they were young men who were unable to serve for a variety of reasons in the regular army. And I do notice them when I'm out and about. They do stand out. I think it's one of those things that mostly they are accident related, although I have found a couple where they were older men who died of natural causes while still serving. But it does illustrate the variety of reasons a serviceman might be found in a local churchyard, and this certainly is the biggest sort of tragic accident that I've come across on my travels, where so many men were lost in one incident. Next, I'm going to take a little trip back to the seaside, to the fast disappearing village of Dunwich on the Suffolk coast. Again, there's a handful of war graves to see here. Thankfully, the cemetery and the old church are a little bit inland, so safe for now. First up, we've got a brown-coloured headstone, not a Commonwealth War grave one, to Skipper Lieutenant Robert Woodgate. Robert was born in the nearby village of Wrestleton on the 23rd of December 1910. And in 1939, he married Edna Price, and they lived together at Gorse Cottage in the village of Dunwich. He served in the Royal Navy Reserve, and he was based at HMS Wildfire, which is a Royal Navy shore base. On the 20th of November 1946, he died of acute appendicitis at the Royal Navy Hospital in Chatham. Again, this is something that sometimes people are surprised by when the death date is outside of the years of conflict. But he died while still serving and of natural causes. The last stop here that I'm just going to briefly mention is at the very back of the cemetery. It's quite well hidden. You have to go all the way through all of the other graves right to a sort of back corner. But it is a white Commonwealth War grave headstone, so you can spot it. And this is the grave of Royal Marine Henry Booth. Henry was born in around 1921 to parents from St Albans in Hertfordshire. And when the war started, he joined the Royal Marines and was assigned to HMS Watchful. However, he was on board another vessel when he died. HMT Thistle was a civilian trawler requisitioned by the Navy in April of 1940. On the 8th of May 1941, it struck a mine off Lowestoft and sank. 10 of her 11 crew were lost, including Marine Booth, and he was just 20 years old at the time. His body was recovered and he was buried in Dunwich churchyard. I don't know why in some of these cases the families didn't bring their loved ones home. Sometimes it was a matter of cost, sometimes men were just buried in the closest place. I don't know what led to Marine Booth being buried in Dunwich, but he does have a very, very peaceful final resting place. It's a beautiful little cemetery extension close to the old leper hospital here in the village. And as I say, thankfully, a little way back from the encroaching waves. I'm going to finish up by taking you back to Norfolk and to a grave that will be very familiar to anyone that's followed me for a little while, because it's a chap that for some reason I really took to. I visit his grave quite often, and I couldn't do a episode on war graves without introducing him. So I'm going to take you to visit a sailmaker's mate of the Royal Navy, Mr. William Whisker. William was born in the tiny village of Wivton on the 15th of October 1881 and grew up in the village. One thing you'll notice about the villages of the North Norfolk coast is that they have a wonderful selection of sailors' graves. So if that's your thing, it's well worth a little whistle-stop tour of the Norfolk coast. William worked as a farm lad before joining the Royal Navy at 18 in 1899. He didn't have an illustrious career, far from it, and as he progressed to become a sailmaker's mate on board HMS Pembroke, he became dependent on alcohol. And I will include a trigger warning again if this subject is going to be sensitive to you, because sadly it doesn't end well. His service record shows that he spent several occasions in the cells for days at a time. I don't know for sure, but it's likely these were directly related to his drinking habit. An awful lot of them were just after he had had leave. And there is certainly some pattern if you have access to service records, it's worth looking him up because it's colourful. One of my favourite things to discover while I was reading up about him, on his service record under wounds, scars, marks, etc., it noted tattoo generally on both arms, bee on chest, butterflies on feet, which brought him to life a little more graphically than the words that usually just describe hair colour, height, all the rest of it. And in the absence of photographs, it's quite a nice little addition to his description. He served throughout the First World War. I don't have anything remarkable to say about his service during the war, but on the 21st of January 1921 he died at the Royal Navy Hospital in Chatham. His cause of death was given as delirium tremens. Delirium tremens is, in its most literal form, trembling delirium, as you might guess. It's the most severe form of alcohol withdrawal. The condition can occur after an abrupt cessation of alcohol in those with chronic use, and it commonly affects those who have used alcohol heavily for long periods of time. I don't know much more about William. I don't know what he was like as a person, nor what brought about his reliance on liquor, but I'm sad to see another veteran of the First World War lost before the age of 40. William's grave sits just behind the church in Wivton, so if you are passing through, go and say hello and take a look at some of the other headstones in the graveyard here. There's some lovely carvings to be found if that's your thing. Again, I have written Substacks on Wivton itself, so if you're interested in the more general history, this little tiny village does actually have some good stories to tell, and I also did a Guidal audio tour if you use the app. I'm going to call it a day there. This is probably one of the most depressing podcast episodes that I'm going to be doing. There's never a good outcome when you're researching war graves, but as I think I've probably made clear, that's why it's important for me to try to tell the stories of the men and women who are found on UK soil. As I say, the tales aren't always exciting, but they are people stories, and if you start to take an interest in social history, you can see how the effects of some of these losses went on to affect whole families and generations that came after. And certainly the attitudes of those who lost loved ones in the First World War and how their opinions about things may have changed by the time the Second World War came around. East Anglia has some wonderful churchyards, and next episode I will be getting back to my normal format of finding a specific grave to do a longer form podcast for. Sometimes it is very difficult to find enough information to talk about, which can make it interesting without recycling information or stories that have been told in multiple other places. I like to do my own research. I take an interest, I think, in headstones that aren't necessarily always that obvious. But that's the nice thing about doing a podcast like this, that I get to make the rules. And as I say, I wanted to do a slightly different episode for this one, for Remembrance Sunday. If you'd like a little bit more, there's an article I put out on Substack last year covering some of the more memorable headstones I'd found, not necessarily for obvious reasons, but that's on my Substack if you want to have a read of that. And back through my earlier posts on Instagram, there are very short snippets of information where, again, I haven't been able to find full stories and enough to do longer form articles, but I did used to make very short TikToks about some of the headstones that I had visited and the graves that I had managed to research. I don't use TikTok anymore, but some of those have previously been shared on Instagram, so by all means go back through the Norma Explores feed if you haven't done so already. And I do hope to get more content out there. I've had difficulty the last few months. As some of you know, I reopened my shop earlier this year, and so my travelling and research has been curtailed quite a lot, actually. Once we get through Christmas, though, I am having a winter break, and I'm going to do a lot more research and try to get back on track with releasing new articles on Substack. And hopefully in the meantime I will keep up at least with my podcasting schedule, which I aim to get a new episode out once a fortnight. So thank you for listening, and I realise this was quite a depressing episode. I will try and find something next time that is less so and a little bit more interesting from a storytelling perspective. But join me in 2 weeks' time and we will see where we end up.